Finding housing can be a daunting task, especially if you don't know the language. Luckily, this video is here to help you understand what types of housing are in Japan and the terms used to describe said housing. And lastly, I will walk you through the processes and fees associated with finding your humble abode. I will only be covering rentals because buying is a separate, more complicated process. If this video doesn't apply to you and you have
36 minutes
of free time, watch anyway and enjoy the knowledge. This video will be dense, but it's been created with lots of love. My name is Bradley and you're watching Japan Reality. Let's get started. I believe it's best to start with the types of housing available in Japan. Share houses, apartments, single-family homes, and company housing or dorms. Yes, there are more classifications than what I just stated. I'm keeping it simple for the purposes and intents of this video. If there's any glaring type of housing I missed, feel free to let me know so I can reflect on my YouTuber abilities. Starting with share houses. A share house is a large house or apartment where you have your own room but share common areas such as the bathroom, living room, and kitchen. It's basically just living with roommates. There are also dorm-style variants where you share your room and thus making it a little bit cheaper. They usually come furnished and employ a cleaning company to deal with the common areas. More often than not, share houses are co-ed, meaning males and females share the same roof. But fear not, for there's female-only share houses as well. Share houses are popular with people that are in Japan for the short term, such as work holiday visa holders, and for people that don't want to bother with the intricacies of finding an apartment. If you're just starting out, this is a great place to make a home base to meet new people and join a de facto community. One upside or downside, depending on how you look at it, is that share houses, at least in Tokyo, are very foreigner heavy. This is because share houses have a lower barrier to entry than standard apartments or single family homes. With that fact, some Japanese people actually live in share houses just to meet foreigners and practice their English because every single foreigner speaks English. There are even some share houses that require a 50-50 split between Japanese people and foreigners. There are quite a few share house companies that operate within Japan, such as big ones like Oak House, Sakura House, and Borderless. There are many options, and since this video isn't sponsored by anyone, just go with your best bet. I recommend just Googling your area share house. I recommend just doing a Google search of your area share house, and there's many blogs and vlogs and other YouTube videos that you can peruse to find more information. Share house rooms will usually be listed directly on the company's website, like this on Oak House and this on Sakura House. Input your requirements and off you go. The reason why share houses have the lowest barrier to entry is because you're not signing a hefty 2-year lease, which is common with regular housing. Share houses are month-to-month leases, so it's easy for you, the tenant, and the landlord to end the agreement. At this point, I want to note that short-term, month-to-month furnished apartments are also a thing if you have a family or don't want to share your space. With all of that said, I actually stayed in a share house when I first moved to Japan, and I'd like to speak on that experience. I stayed in an Oak House share house in central Tokyo. The reason I chose them was because they had a good website, their guidelines were clear, they had fast responses, and you could pay by credit card, at least in the beginning. And probably most importantly, they had a share house in the area I wanted. I was able to view the room online and reserve it with a credit card while I was still out of country. I simply had to pay a contract fee of 30,000 yen and first month's rent of 92,000 yen at the time. All utilities were included in this price. I had a video of me touring the room when I moved out, but it seems like I deleted it. So I'll use their website to show where I used to live and dox myself. And that's where I used to live. I look like a stalker right now. Apologies to whoever lives there right now. Yeah, right above that 24-hour fitness gym and this place. I just doxed myself. Go figure. That was my attempt at filming outside. There were a lot of people around it and I got really nervous. It was a relatively small share house, but it had all the necessary amenities to live at ease. Every room opened into the kitchen/dining room to facilitate mingling. There were 2 toilets, one co-ed and another just for women. There was a balcony to hang your clothes after sending them through the wash, and there were 2 showers. The room came furnished, which was perfect for me who moved with just 2 suitcases. I was lucky in that my manager and my housemates were all amicable people. Since it was a more expensive share house, all my roommates were full-time workers as well. There were some issues such as the dishes not being clean and shoes not being put away properly, but nothing large enough to warrant any huge critique of Oak House or my other roommates. I mean, I was probably a source of some of those issues. While I lived there, I jumped around Tokyo and finally found myself an apartment. So in the end, I stayed in the share house for just about 5 months. Breaking the lease was relatively simple. All I had to do was tell Oak House, hey, I'm leaving in 1 month, and I left in 1 month. They had a whole move-out procedure and the manager came by to check everything, but I didn't ruin the place, so there were no extra fees or any hidden fees. So all in all, I recommend Oak House, but then again, I'm not sponsored. It'd be great if they were sponsoring me, but I'm not. So I'll leave the final decision making up to you. On to the next type of housing, which is apartments. Apartments are flats, or apartments, depending on where in the world you're from. One thing you need to know off the bat is that in Japan, apartments are not called apartments. They're called mansion. This confuses a lot of English speakers, myself included, because you'd expect a mansion to be something very, very different. To confuse your viewers even more, there's another word for apartment in Japanese, apato, which is just the shortened version of apartment. Both of these words are used to refer to apartments, apato and mansion. Which one is right, and which one should you use? According to unreferenced articles I found online, back in the 1960s, to spruce up their own apartment, some developer called their apartment mansion, because mansion in English means, a massive house. Other developers followed suit, and thus there was a positive feedback loop, and all developers started calling their apartments mansion. This is how we ended up with a different definition of mansion in our everyday vernacular. Between apato and mansion, legally speaking, there is no difference. Its use is up to the discretion of the realtor or developer. So, this is probably a mansion, and those are mansion as well as that tower mansion over there. But this one here could be a mansion or apato. It really depends, as I've stated before. Thank you, outside correspondent, but I believe the last building you pointed out is actually a mansion. I would consider this an apartment because it's 2 stories tall and probably made of wood. Honestly, it could be concrete, but you get the idea. Thank you, outside correspondent number 2. I'd also consider that an apato. You can tell by the way it is. Joking and intuition aside, apato are seen as smaller 2 to 3 story wooden structures, while mansion are seen as buildings that are concrete that are 3 stories or taller. There's a lot of overlap between the word apato and mansion, so as to not confuse yourself, I recommend using the word mansion for anything apartment or flat. You know what I mean. Apartments are much smaller in Japan. To put it into perspective, this 52 square meter studio would be on the bigger side in Tokyo. This is actually where I used to live, by the way, and I'm calling it a studio, not a 1-bedroom, because there's no door to the bedroom. After moving out of the share house, my first apartment was in a building built in the 80s. I was on the 5th floor with no elevator. The entire apartment was 27 square meters with a loft. The image I'm showing is it. The laundry machine was under the stovetop. I had a tiny sink and almost no storage space. The bathroom and toilet were in the narrow hallway. And upstairs in the loft, I had a tiny mobile closet and access to a massive rooftop with great views of the Japanese Empire State Building. With 2 people, it was very tiny. It also didn't have bicycle parking, so I carried my bike to the 5th floor every time. It was fun living there, and it was only 5 minutes by train from the famous Shibuya crossing, scramble, whatever you call that. But the smallness got to me. The farther you move away from the city center, the more available 50 square meter plus apartments become, and for a much more reasonable price. Now that we're done with apartments, we can move on to homes. A single-family home is called a kodate or ikkodate in Japanese. This is the type of housing I'm currently living in, and it's nice, and I'd show you, but I don't want to actually dox myself. Townhomes do exist in Japan, but for the intents and purposes of this video, I will be considering them single-family homes. Lastly, we have company housing, or shataku in Japanese. This could be provided by your employer. Company housing comes in all shapes, forms, and sizes, from single-family homes to dormitories. So, what's the best type of housing for you? I'm not making this video to choose for you, but here's the steps I took in my housing journey in Japan. Because of the easy move-in process and month-to-month lease, I stayed in a share house for 5 months while I got acclimated to Japan in Tokyo. After sufficiently exploring Tokyo, I moved into a tiny 27 square meter apartment with great views of the Japanese Empire State Building. I'm really pushing that point. And I lived there for just over a year. I outgrew that apartment and moved into the suburbs into a single-family home because I wanted a parking spot for my seldom used car, and my wife wanted a four-legged creature. Kawaii ne. And that's where I am today. Now that we've gone over the main types of housing, we need to know how we describe housing. I mean, how can you find what you want if you don't even know what to search for? In North America, we quantify and qualify housing with bedrooms, bathrooms, and square footage. However, Japan describes housing with madori and seiyu menseki. In English, this would be the LDK system and square meters. LDK stands for living, dining, and kitchen. Looking at these examples provided by Sumo, link in the description below, we can see the LDK smashed together. This is because the living room, dining room, and kitchen are in an open floor plan. If we scroll down a little bit, there's a floor plan where the living room and dining room are separated from the kitchen, although this time it's written entirely in Japanese for some reason. Scrolling back up to the first example, there's a room called yōshitsu, which means Western-style room. This can be considered the bedroom. To complement this Western-style room, apartments can also come with washitsu, or Japanese-style rooms. The difference between these two types of rooms is the flooring, with the Japanese style employing tatami mats and the Western style employing wooden, vinyl, or concrete flooring. There's a couple more abbreviations such as CL and UB. This means closet and unit bath respectively. Finally, there's portions written in Japanese such as the toilet, hallway, genkan, shoe storage, laundry room, washing machine placement, and refrigeration placement. When searching for an apartment, their overviews may come with more or less information. Along with LDK, you may see LDKS or LDK plus W, or some other amalgamation of letters. There are many more abbreviations that can be added on, and I've pasted a link to the webpage that goes over the main ones. People keep creating new abbreviations, so don't assume that the website is comprehensive. Let me show you a couple more examples so we get this embedded in your brain. This is a 2 LDK. The 2 is determined by the amount of rooms, Western or Japanese style, within the house or apartment. A 2DK has 2 Western or Japanese style rooms, a dining room, and kitchen. A 1K, one of the smallest and cheapest styles of room money can rent, has 1 room and a kitchen separated by a door. The smallest style is 1R or 1 room, just enough space for all the activities. My 27 square meter apartment was a 1DK. Once again, looping back to the first example to finish off my explanation, there's the number 10 under LDK and the number 4.3 under the Western style room, followed by this kanji, jo. Jo means tatami mat. That means that the LDK is the size of 10 tatami mats. But how large is a tatami mat? Tatami mat size varies by region, but the leading conversion seems to be 1.62 square meters per 1 tatami mat. If you want to be certain, you need to ask the realtor. Jo is used to represent the sizes of rooms within an apartment or home. What I'm trying to say is that in this picture, we only know the size of the LDK, 16.2 square meters, and the Western style room, about 7 square meters. If we want to know the total size of the apartment or home, we need the total square meters of the space from the realtor. Instead of jo, you may see jo or J hashtag or pound if you're born before the year 2000. They all represent the same thing. Finally, while we're on the topic of jo, I'd like to bring up the measurement of tsubo, which is 2 tatami mats, or 3.3 square meters. This measurement is typically reserved for the area of land. Now that we have the vocabulary to find the housing we want, we need to understand the kinds of fees associated with moving in. From my experience with renting in the US, there was just a security deposit and maybe paying first month's rent. Japan is a different beast. When I was looking at apartments the other year, I received the following quote, which I'll put up on the screen right now, barring any personal information, of course. So this is a 2-year lease, which is a very standard length in Japan. So starting from the top, we had yachin, which means rent at 210,000 yen a month. Kyoeki is condo or management fees at 10,000 yen per month. We then have the planned move-in date of November 15th. The first 6 lines are prorated rent and management fees for the month of November and a full month's rent in December. This also included bicycle parking at a prorated 176 yen for November and a full 330 yen for December. You're expected to pay for at least 1 month's rent up front. Shikikin in the middle of the page means deposit. This apartment had a 2-month deposit at 420,000 yen. However, for most housing, this is typically only 1 month's worth of rent. Reikin is literally thank you money, a holdout from the days past when housing was hard to come by. This is slowly going away, but for the time being, it is what it is. Kasai Hoken, which is fire insurance, was 27,000 yen. This is a reoccurring payment when your lease renews. Shokai Hoshou Itaku Ryo is a guarantor payment, which was half my rent at 110,165 yen. I will go into the guarantor system in more detail after explaining the other fees. The next one is Chukai Tesuryo, or realtor fees. This is 1 month's rent at 210,000 yen. If a realtor tries to charge you above 1 month's rent, I'd suggest finding another realtor. All in all, the upfront payment I'd have to make before moving into this apartment was 1,336,004 yen. That's a lot of money, especially for something that I won't ever own. Because the rent was high at 210,000 yen, the move-in fees are also high, but this is par for the course. You can expect to pay 4 to 6 months worth of rent in just move-in fees. For example, 80,000 yen a month would be 480,000 yen in move-in fees, and 120,000 yen a month would be approximately 720,000 yen just for move-in fees. There is one other fee that is usually included that wasn't in mine, and that's kagi koukan hyo, key change money. This is about 20,000 yen to get your locks changed. These are the main fees that you'd expect to see, but keep in mind that it's really dependent on each apartment. Lately, there are more and more apartments that have 0 key money, 0 thank you money, and even a 0 yen deposit. Lastly, lease renewal depends on the contract you signed. It could be 0 months worth of rent, or it could be 1 month worth of rent. Jumping back to the quote, I'd said I'd speak more about this line, Shokai Hoshou Itaku Ryo. The guarantor system is used to keep tenants accountable. A guarantor would be jointly responsible for any liabilities to the landlord. For example, if the tenant skipped town, the guarantor would be on the hook. Back before guarantor companies were widespread, a guarantor would typically be a family member or very close friend. But you might be wondering, how is somebody supposed to get a guarantor if they have no family or friends? Well, this was, and in some cases still is, an issue. So in came the guarantor companies. They pool money from their constituents like an insurance company, because they are an insurance company for housing. So if one of the tenants skipped town, they use that accumulated money to pay out to the landlord. A guarantor company usually charges half a month's worth of rent at initial move-in, and then 1 to 2% of your rent thereafter every month. At the end of the lease, if you decide to renew, like I said before, it really depends on your contract, and you may have to pay a guarantor renewal fee. Now that you know Japanese housing jargon and the fees you'll be paying, how do you actually find your humble abode? You could just go to the area where you want to live and find a realtor. They're usually really easy to find. They have massive glass windows with a bunch of listings on the window. I'll put up something on the video right now. Or what I recommend is to go on the internet and go onto Sumo or Homes, which is the Japanese version of Zillow for you Americans. I'll take you through Sumo's website to give you a nice clean overview of how we can use their interface, and this is actually how I found where I live today. I'm going to go off script here, so bear with me just a little bit. Here I am on Sumo. This is the main site I use when I search for an apartment and my single family home. But just to cover all my bases, there's other websites such as homes.co.jp and Kanari, which I keep seeing ads for because I've been researching this video so much. Anyway, coming back to Sumo, let's go ahead and just start using it. I want to start in the Kanto region, which has Tokyo, where I live. And I'm going to choose rental properties. But of course, you can choose newer used apartments and newer used single-family homes to purchase. And in this case, I'm going to choose along the train line. In Tokyo and most other places of Japan, you're going to want to live close to a train station because that's probably going to be your main way of commuting and getting to other places. So along the train line. And I'm going to click on the Yamanote line, the most crowded train line, I guess the most used train line in Tokyo. And I'm going to click on somewhere everybody knows, Shibuya, with that famous Shibuya Scramble. And I'm going to go ahead and search with these conditions. And of course, all of these websites will always show you the most luxurious apartments, but we're going to go ahead and filter down to conditions that we can afford and what we want. So in this case, I'm not going to put rent because it's Shibuya and Shibuya is really expensive. But you can see here that you can choose to have management fees included, or key money, or deposit. And in this case, I want a 1 LDK. As for building type, this says apartment and apartment, but if we translate it back to Japanese, it would say mansion and apato, the two differences I explained earlier. And to me, the difference doesn't matter, so I'm going to leave those unchecked. Walking distance from the station is really, really important, and I'm going to choose within 10 minutes. Although if you choose this, it's more like 12 to 13 minutes. But like I said, you're going to be commuting and doing everything near the train line, and that's where all the malls are too. So this is very, very important in my opinion. Exclusive area. I want to live kind of luxuriously, so let's say 50 square meters. And as for the age of the building, I'm going to put 15 years. This is very important because Japanese earthquake standards change every couple of years, so you want to live in a newer building. And I'm going to talk more about these regulations at the end of the video. Special conditions. I want a separate toilet and bath, something I'll also talk about at the end of the video, and second floor or higher. Here it says air conditioning, and I'm also going to say this at the end of the video, but some places actually don't come with air conditioners, but more often than not they do, so I'm going to leave this unchecked. And with these conditions, I'm going to go ahead and search. 400, oh my god, like 450,000 yen a month. And oh, this one's cheaper at 31,000 yen. But these are really, really pricey. But as you can see, there's a bunch of options that come up, and I'll change this back to English. And you can search by the order of lowest rent or to highest rent. And with this one I just clicked on earlier, if we click on here, we can see, the layout, like, every other apartment or house hunting website across the planet. But this is just the Japanese version. And if we like this apartment, we can go ahead and click on Learn More. Actually, but before that, here we see the deposit and key money required. This requires 1 month's worth deposit and 1 month of thank you money. Learn more. So here we can see the other data that we want to see, such as the exact location, walking distance to important places, mostly train stations as you can see, the area of the place, the floor, the apartment type, the direction, very important for sunlight. And if all of these things are up to your fancy, then you can inquire about this property by sending an email or actually calling the specific realtor that listed it on Sumo. That's the main gist of Sumo. But one last thing I want to point out is that this apartment is really expensive at 310,000 yen a month for 52 square meters. If we move 30 to 40 minutes away from Shibuya, in this case, this is Hiyoshi, which has a direct connection to Shibuya, we can see that a similarly old building and 52 square meters is about 13,000 yen a month, more than half the price for a pretty large living area. Tokyo, like other cities, is very location dependent, so if you can stomach a commute, I'd recommend living a bit further away so that you can have a better standard of living. If you're watching this video, you're probably not Japanese or are Japanese but lived most of your life abroad. Anyway, if you've perused the internet for Japanese housing, you may have come across videos, articles, and blogs about housing discrimination. This discrimination does exist. Landlords will deny you for being foreign. This is illegal, but the pathways to hold them accountable are very cumbersome. You don't want to be giving your money to that kind of landlord anyway. This is the way it is, and I don't see it changing anytime soon. This is one of the reasons why many foreigners swear by share houses. Low cost and hassle-free. But if you really want your own apartment or house, what can you do? Well, there's housing companies like UR and Weave Living which accommodate or simply don't care that you're a foreigner. Another path to apartment freedom is to ask your other foreign friends what realtor they used. Those realtors probably know how to sweet talk some stubborn landlords. Otherwise, it's a numbers game. Keep applying to apartments and hope that the realtor and landlord will work with you. I'm very sorry that there isn't an easier way. So now that we're close to locking down housing, what kind of documentation do we actually need? First, you want your passport and Zairyu Kado. This Zairyu Kado, or foreigner card, is something that you receive upon arrival into Japan. If you've been here longer, you should have a My Number card, which is Japan's all-encompassing ID. For you Americans, it's like a social security number if the social security number was actually secure. You'll then need an official letter from your job or school to show the landlord and realtor. Next up is proof of income, so 2 to 3 months worth of pay stubs, and maybe even your tax return. The other option is to prove that you have stacks of cash in the bank. Second to last is having an emergency contact in the country. This could be a friend, your school, or your workplace. Lastly, you'll want a Japanese phone number and Japanese bank account. A bonus item to have would be a hanko, or seal, which is Japan's way of doing signatures. This is slowly being phased out, but for some contracts you may need this. I'm very sorry, but for this video I'm not going to explain where you get and register your hanko. There should definitely be some other resources online. If you're just moving to Japan, how are you already going to have a Japanese bank account or even a Japanese phone number? Well, you might get stuck in document catch-22. Technically, if you have your passport in Zairyu Kado, if the landlord and realtor are willing, you could probably get a place, but that's very risky and no one will do that. This is why it's important to plan and understand your initial steps in the country. Here are a couple standard methods to ensure that you don't get stuck in housing limbo. Method 1. School. If you come to Japan with the intent of studying at a university or language school, most of the time you'll stay in housing provided by the school. The school may also have realtor and landlord contacts to get you set up with little hassle. You can use this address to set up a phone number and bank account. Method 2. Company housing. If your company provides housing right off the bat, you can use that as your initial base in Japan. Method 3. Share house. This is the safest and easiest method for those that aren't planning to stay in company housing or school dormitories. When I signed my lease for my share house, I didn't have a local phone number or bank account. But the share house didn't care. They were more than happy to email me or contact me via their online chat portal. I was also able to pay with a foreign credit card until I set up bank transfers. If share houses aren't your thing, Short-term apartments do exist, and they give you the same bureaucratic benefits as share houses. Great, so we found our dream apartment or house. Now we need to understand the contract that we're signing. There are two main types of housing contracts in Japan. 普通借家契約 and 定期借家契約. 普通借家契約 means standard rental agreement. This is the most common agreement. Unless the tenant sends in a notice to vacate the apartment at the end of the term, this rental agreement automatically renews, whether that be after 1 or 2 years. 定期借家契約 is a fixed-term lease. The lease ends at the end of the term. A new contract must be written if both parties want to continue with the previous conditions. This is the kind of contract I was used to in the US. Congratulations on signing your lease, but we're not out of the woods yet. If it's not a fully inclusive lease, you need to set up your electricity, gas, water, and internet. The realtor should be able to point you to companies operating in your area. Make sure you schedule these beforehand, especially if you're moving during the busy season of March and April. That was my attempt at explaining the housing process from A to Z. But I'd like to close out this video with my own opinions and tips for housing in Japan. 二人入居か room share か Apartments will state whether or not 2 or more people can live there. 二人入居 is geared towards married couples and or relatives, while room share is geared towards friends and significant others. Many people don't tell their landlords when they begin to live with significant others or friends, but I recommend not doing that because that's one of the ways you can get kicked out of your housing. Apartments and houses do not have minimum parking requirements like the US, so it's difficult to find spaces for cars and even bicycles. So if you want a car, more often than not, the apartment will not have on-site parking, so you'll have to enter a contract with a separate parking area company. When I lived in that 27 square meter apartment, my parking area was 1 kilometer away from my house. Bicycle parking is also not required, but I highly recommend you find an apartment with one. Bicycles are really handy and can sometimes even be faster than the train. Japanese structures as a whole are poorly insulated. Thus you can hear your neighbors really easily, and they can also hear what you're doing. So if possible, if you can move into a newer concrete building, you can have more peace of mind. If you're not able to do that, I recommend living on the top floor of apartments, as you won't have anyone above you. Insulation is bad. Not just sound insulation like I said earlier, but actual warm, cold insulation. In my 1980s 27 square meter apartment, I had 2 ACs, and I could blast them on high the entire time, and yet it would still be extremely hot in my apartment. Luckily, the house I live in now is pretty well insulated, so I don't have that issue anymore, but please keep that in mind. Make sure your sink and unit bath are separate. In space-constrained Japan, architects like to place the bathtub and sink in the same wet room. This sucks ergonomically because if you have to use the sink after you took a shower, the floor is wet and you have to lean in awkwardly to save your slippers. Switching to a sink that was outside the wet room increased my standard of living tenfold. If you commute by train, stay within 10 minutes of the station. After 10 minutes, walks start to become dull, especially if you have to do it every single day. Unless you really like walks, then this doesn't apply to you. Lofts aren't a good idea. There's no separation between the loft and the main floor. This leads to really bad climate control. I have a loft in my current home, and on very hot days, the temperature differential between the first floor and the third floor is very big. Laundry machines, refrigerators, and sometimes even ACs are not included with apartments. Make sure that whatever laundry machine and refrigerator you have now fits in your new apartment, specifically the corridors and doors. Get a practically dimensioned room. In a lot of other YouTube videos, you see some wacky small apartments with weird angles. Practically speaking, nothing will fit right and you'll have a lot of empty space that you can't even use. Bad neighbors. This one is kind of hard to judge because you don't know who you're going to be living next to once you move in. But if you can, investigate the neighborhood and the vibes of the apartment. to make sure that you don't get stuck with bad neighbors who like to stomp on the floor at 2 a.m. Earthquake resistance is very important for the seismically active country of Japan. If possible, or not if possible, I really recommend this, get a house or apartment that was built after 1981. In 1981, there were major reforms to earthquake regulations so that houses can withstand larger earthquakes. Pre-1981, buildings were built to withstand Shindo 5. This is the Japanese earthquake scale, with 1 being the lowest and 7 being the highest. To put into perspective, the 2024 Noto earthquake was Shindo 7. So if you were in a pre-1981 building, that could spell disaster. I hope I cleared up any concerns that you had about living in Japan, whether you already live here, plan to live here, or you're just watching for the knowledge gained. Feel free to like the video if you made it this far, and if you have any questions or comments, let me know and I'll try my darndest to respond to them. Happy apartment/house hunting, and I'll see you in the next one.